Namaste and welcome to Lunar Mysticism Vidya. Today I will be sharing a short video on the September eclipses and Pitru Paksha. My website is lunarmysticismvidya.com, or you could also find me on Instagram by scanning the QR code. Now, this Pitru Paksha coincides with two powerful eclipses, and this will be occurring September 7th through 21st. Now, this year, the 16-day period or 15-day period, depends who you ask, that honors the ancestors is known as Shraddha, or Pitru Paksha coincides with two eclipses. We have our September 7th eclipse in Purnima of the Bhadrapada month, occurring in the nakshatra of Purva Bhadrapada in Kumbha or Aquarius, and September 21st eclipse is on Amavasya in the month of Ashwina in the nakshatra of Uttara Phalguni in Kanya or Virgo. So these two signs will be the most affected by the eclipse, so Kumbha and Kanya. Now also, if we're taking into account the axis of the eclipse, that would be Leo and Aquarius being most affected by September 7th eclipse, and Pisces and Virgo being the most affected by September 21st eclipse. So let's start with our total lunar eclipse or blood moon on September 7th or 8th, depending on your time. I'm using PST. Now, this is going to be a total lunar eclipse affecting the countries of Ukraine, India, Australia, Russia, and the Middle East, if you look on that map on the top left. And I have pulled the map for Donetsk, Ukraine, and the chart is also for Ukraine, because if we look at that map, we see it is directly in the path of the eclipse. Now, we know that there has been a push to end the Ukraine war and a mediation by our President Donald Trump with both Vladimir Putin and Zelensky. So we know that this is coming to a close, and the fact that is happening on the eclipse cycle does show that there will be some kind of closure to this event. Now, we saw in July the first major anti-government protests take place across Ukraine since the beginning of the war, so it's time for it to be done, and the people have spoken, and they would like to see peace in their country, as well as the rest of us in the world would wish that for Ukraine and Russia. Now, another interesting world event that is tied into this eclipse cycle is August. We had a discovery in melted ice of bones of a polar researcher who died in Antarctica in 1959. So as we also see, this eclipse cycle is going to be touching Antarctica on both September 8th, 7th, and the 21st. So Antarctica is going to be part of this new cycle at some point within the next year, if not directly after these eclipses. So our second eclipse is going to be a partial solar eclipse, and that will be on September 21st. This will be affecting the countries of mostly French Polynesia, the Cook Islands, Fiji, Australia, the Solomon Islands, New Zealand, and Antarctica. Now I've pulled the eclipse map and pinned the small island of Macquarie Island off of Tasmania, Australia, as it is directly in the path of the eclipse, and in the lower part of the map you can see Antarctica is also being impacted by this eclipse. So in this eclipse, we have the first eclipse not affecting the United States, but India is being affected. So please check for your local time to see if you're going to have to observe what we call Sutak, or the observance of avoiding any kind of activities during the eclipse. So now let's talk about Pitru Paksha. So what is Pitru Paksha? It is the sacred fortnight of remembrance when the ancestors return to earth to receive gifts from us and bless us with fortune for the next generations. There is a story in our Shastras about the importance of performing this ritual and how it affects us in this life and in the next. So in the Shastras, there's two stories. The first story is of Karna, who had during his life donated gold and all of these different precious metals and jewelry, expensive things. And he never performed Shraddha because he didn't know his ancestors. So after he died, he experienced hunger and was only given gold. And when he asked Lord Yama, some other stories mention at conversation with Indra, he was told that he was not receiving food because he did not perform Shraddha. So this is why we perform the Shraddha, so that we receive the food in the afterlife from our newly incarnated family here on earth. The second story, talking about the importance of Shraddha, comes from a conversation between Bhima and Yudhishthir, where the importance of Shraddha is discussed, and it's also mentioned that you should perform Shraddha or have it performed for you so that you can appease the ancestors. Because many people believe that wars and misfortune that occur here on earth happen due to the Pitris not being fed and cared for. Interestingly enough, this tradition also exists in Mexico, but it's celebrated as Dia de los Muertos, which means Day of the Dead, where in this tradition, the belief is that the family members come back down to earth and they commune with their families here, and they are offered very similar things to this Shraddha. They're offered food, wine, all the things they liked, and altars are created all over the homes of families. Now, this is traditionally celebrated on October 31st to November 1st. So another important part of the tradition is feeding Brahmins, crows, and the donation of grains, food, and clothing. So a simple understanding of Shraddha is making offerings to the ancestors in the form of their favorite meal, water, and the traditional pindadan, which is sesame, rice, and honey balls. Now, the best place to perform Shraddha in India is Varanasi, Gaya, Haridwar, and Prayagraj. And if you're not in India, the alternate places would be to perform it in a body of water. Now, you can also have this performed by a qualified pujari or temple priest. So some of the world events, and we would call Mandini Jyotish, that may be triggered by this eclipse season, according to my own research. Now, the effects of the eclipses should last about 1 to 2 years after they occur. So investigations into the origins of COVID-19 and biological terrorism are events that are slowly unfolding, and as these eclipses trigger these end of wars, we'll start to see that there is going to be a connection between Ukraine, China, biological terrorism, and the United States. Now, what's also coming to light is vaccines and their safety is being questioned, as the CDC, which is a huge institution here in the United States, there's been a huge purge of their personnel. due to their inability to scientifically weigh evidence, and also to use science to evaluate the safety of pharmaceutical products, you can say. There was also the raid of John Bolton, his home, who was the former boss of Anthony Fauci. If you don't know who that is, once you see a picture, you'll say, I've seen that guy in the news, where he bragged about creating coups in other countries. So this man is now under investigation, and we will see the ties to all of these previously mentioned investigations. Now, there's also been a shift in public sentiment over health and what is necessary for healthy lives, and food and lifestyle seem to be the number one concerns of the public over pharmaceuticals and vaccines, which is a huge shift from the past 5 years, where the culture has been promoting vaccines for everything. Now, hopefully we'll see a peace agreement for Ukraine and Russia and the end of the war. Another important things that we can see coming up would be innovation, AI, and the global market, compliance culture, and corporate culture shifting to more transparency versus blind allegiance. Now, what does that mean? There seems to be a culture in the corporate world now where people are just compliant to whatever their superiors say, regardless of their alliances. They may not have the best intentions for the public or for their employees. Now, there is a shift to asking for more transparency in the culture of corporations or in businesses. Freedom of speech is also another issue, and the role of the media in spreading disinformation and misinformation. And that goes back to the Smith-Mundt Act here in the United States, but many people now are asking for freedom of speech to be not just important in the United States, but also in the UK. We're seeing a massive call for freedom of speech for their, the people there. And why is this all happening in regards to health and the population in massive global, way, not in a more localized way? This is because Rahu feels at home in Aquarius, and Kanya is said to be co-ruled by Ketu. Now, we just had Ketu move out of Kanya, and it's now in Simha, which Simha is the sun, right? And the sun is government, and it's also the soul. So there's a reckoning that people are having in regards to what their purpose is. And, does the government have my best health in mind? Do they care about my family? And all of these type of questions seem to be more prominent in the public square of, if you look at Twitter, for example, where there is less censorship and more discussions on global issues in real time. So with that being said, thank you for your attention to this matter. Hari Om Tat Sat. Have an auspicious Shraddha, and may you all have a very nice eclipse season. I wish you auspiciousness.